You think the worst day of your life is when you bury the love of your life, but for me, it was what I heard just 20 feet away from her casket. Speed up the inheritance, I'm putting down the deposit next week. That voice was my daughter-in-law, and the silence that followed? It wasn't shock, it was my son, agreeing with her. That's when I realized. My wife's death wasn't the only loss I'd suffer that week. My name is Gerald Morris. I'm a 68-year-old retired high school principal. I spent most of my life believing that if you were kind, worked hard, and loved your family with your whole heart, you'd be rewarded with peace in your later years. I had that, for a time. My wife, Ellen, was everything to me. We were married for 42 years. She was the heart of our home, the warmth in every winter, the steady hand when I faltered. She raised our son Nathan with so much grace and strength that I often felt like I was just trying to keep up. I was never the loud one in the room. Ellen was the light, I was the quiet anchor beside her. But cancer doesn't care about love. Illness doesn't pause for sentiment. Ellen had been declining for years. By the end, it felt like every breath was a war she had to fight alone. And when she finally passed, I thought I had reached the lowest point in my life. I was wrong. The church was filled with soft organ music and sympathetic murmurs. People I hadn't seen in years showed up, hands on my shoulder, saying things like, "She was an angel," or, "You two were the perfect couple." I smiled, nodded, tried to stay standing, and then I stepped out, just for a moment. The hallway outside the chapel was dim and quiet. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes, trying to gather myself. That's when I heard voices. I wouldn't have noticed, except the door to the bridal room had been left slightly open. Inside, I heard the familiar voice of my daughter-in-law, Claire. "Speed up the inheritance, I'm putting down the deposit next week." There was a pause. Then Nathan laughed, a low, dry chuckle. "Don't worry, he's too broken to notice. A few more weeks, and it's all ours." I froze. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I couldn't. I wanted to believe I misunderstood. That maybe they were talking about something else. That grief had clouded my judgment. But no, I knew what I heard. That wasn't grief. That wasn't sorrow. That was opportunism. Cold, calculated, and it was coming from the two people I thought were all I had left. I didn't confront them. Not right away. I walked out of that hallway with legs like lead and returned to my wife's funeral like nothing had happened, because if I said anything in that moment, I would have broken apart. And I couldn't fall apart yet. Not with Ellen lying in that casket, looking more peaceful than she had in months. But inside, something shifted. I began to replay memories I had long buried. Moments I had brushed off as harmless, now suddenly casting long shadows. Claire, my daughter-in-law, she had always been polite, but never warm, not truly. She smiled when needed, hosted when required, and said the right things, but there was something hollow in the way she interacted with me and Ellen. I remember once, during Ellen's third round of chemo, Claire dropped by with Nathan. Ellen was weak, nauseated, barely able to sit up. Claire gave her a brief, awkward hug, then launched into a conversation about real estate investments. Right there in the living room, while Ellen clutched a blanket and fought to stay awake. "There's this property in Westbridge," she'd said, eyes gleaming. "Duplex. Great return potential. We just need a little down payment help, nothing major." Nathan had looked at me then, just a glance, a silent request, and I had smiled, because that's what you do when your son asks. You give. Even when your heart is breaking, you give. I ended up transferring $30,000 from our savings the next morning. I told myself Ellen would have wanted that. But now, standing at her funeral, I realized. Claire hadn't even looked at her that day, not once. After the service, people came up to me, some with casseroles, some with flowers, all with pity in their eyes. Nathan stood beside me for 10 minutes before slipping away with Claire. Didn't even tell me they were leaving, just disappeared. I rode home alone, in the back of a car Ellen and I used to share. Our house felt colder than the cemetery. I stood in our living room that night, still in my funeral suit, and stared at the family photo on the mantel, the one we'd taken 5 years ago at the beach. Ellen in her sun hat, Nathan laughing with an arm around Claire, and me, holding up the tripod remote like a proud fool. I'd thought we were a happy family. But that night, for the first time, I wondered, was that ever true? Or was I the only one who believed it? The next morning, I called my attorney, not for revenge, not yet. I just needed to know what Ellen and I had built over 42 years, the home, the savings, the retirement funds, where it was, who had access, what Claire could or couldn't touch. And that's when I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Nathan had been made co-signatory on one of our accounts, the one holding over $180,000 from Ellen's old pension fund. It had been a precaution, done quietly when Ellen's health began to seriously decline. Just in case something happens to both of us, she'd said, frail but smiling. Nathan will know what to do. He knew what to do, all right. The account was nearly empty. Withdrawals, over the past 6 months, quiet, clean, timed perfectly between my hospital visits with Ellen. It wasn't grief Claire was hiding, it was a heist. I didn't cry that night. I wanted to, God knows I wanted to, but the pain didn't spill out the way it should have. Instead, it calcified, hardened into something sharper. I sat in Ellen's chair in the living room, the one she always curled up in with a book and a cup of peppermint tea, and I stared at nothing for hours. The truth was settling in now, heavy. I wasn't just grieving a wife. I was grieving a family I thought I had. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I started snooping. Not the reckless, emotional kind. I was deliberate. Ellen used to keep a small safe in the bedroom closet. Nothing fancy, just a place to keep personal documents, handwritten notes, mementos. The last Christmas card Nathan ever gave her was in there, along with something else, something I had forgotten even existed. A sealed manila envelope. Ellen's handwriting on the front, only if I'm gone, for Gerald. I froze. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were printouts, bank records, notes, passwords, and a letter. My love, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I know you always trusted Nathan to do the right thing. I tried to believe it too. But over the past year, I've started seeing things, transfers, questions about our will, conversations he thinks I couldn't hear from the hallway. I didn't want to hurt you with suspicion, but just in case something happens, I want you to know, I don't trust Claire. Be careful, Jerry. My throat closed up. Ellen had known. She had known and protected me even as she was dying, and I had been blind. The next week, I invited Nathan and Claire over, just for dinner, nothing formal. I didn't want to tip them off. I told them I missed them, wanted to feel close to family again. Claire showed up in heels and a designer coat. Nathan brought cheap wine and forced conversation. They didn't ask about Ellen, not once, but they did mention, casually, almost as a joke, that the house might feel too big now, that I should consider downsizing and moving closer to people. Claire, ever gracious, offered to help me with the transition. We could list it for you, she said, sipping wine with those hollow eyes. The market's hot right now. It's a great opportunity. And that's when I knew. This wasn't grief. This wasn't family. This was a slow, quiet robbery. That night, after they left, I stayed up. I logged into every account Ellen had documented, cross-checked every paper, made copies, created backups. I contacted our old financial advisor, one Claire and Nathan didn't know, and started rearranging everything. I wasn't going to confront them, not yet. Let them think they had the upper hand. Let them believe I was just a grieving, lonely old man with a house full of memories and no clue what was happening. Let them, because I was about to take back everything they thought they'd stolen. I started playing the part of the grieving, aging widower perfectly. I canceled a few lunch appointments with friends. I let my voicemail pile up. I even started forgetting things when I spoke to Nathan and Claire, pretending to misplace my checkbook, or asking what day it was. Claire soaked it up like sunshine. Every visit, she brought a new form, a new idea, something else she could help me with. She wanted me to update Ellen's life insurance beneficiaries. She wanted me to give her power of attorney, just in case I had a fall. She even joked that I could move into an assisted living community and live my golden years without worrying. "We'd take care of the house for you," she said, touching my arm with false sympathy. "Keep it in the family." Every word made me sicker than the last, but I smiled, nodded, thanked her for her kindness, because I was recording everything. I had installed discreet security cameras in the living room, dining room, even the porch. Claire had no idea that every time she smirked, every time she mentioned next steps, I was documenting it. Nathan, on the other hand, he wasn't as slick. He still called me Dad, but his eyes couldn't meet mine. And one day, when I was walking past his car in my driveway, I saw a manila folder on the passenger seat with my name written on it, bold, underlined, and next to it, the word assets. They weren't waiting for me to die. They were accelerating the process. I didn't have many people left. No close siblings. No children of my own. Nathan was the closest thing I had ever had to a son. But betrayal has a way of making you reevaluate your entire history. That week, I called Ellen's old lawyer, a woman named Margaret who had always had a sharp mind and a sharper sense of loyalty. I told her everything, showed her the footage, the documents, the recordings, the letter Ellen had written me. She didn't hesitate. "We'll change the will," she said firmly. "We'll create a trust. Everything will be airtight." And we did. The house? Placed into a living trust, with Claire and Nathan legally barred from ever accessing it. The accounts? Moved into a protected fund with strict instructions. The insurance? Redirected, updated, locked down. But that wasn't enough. I didn't want to just protect Ellen's legacy. I wanted to expose their greed, publicly, irrevocably. Poetic justice. And so I made a decision, a plan, a final gathering. I invited Nathan and Claire to a memorial dinner for Ellen. I told them it was something intimate, something sacred, that I wanted to say a few words in her honor, and asked them to invite their closest friends. They agreed. They even offered to cater it themselves. "Let us take care of you," Claire said. And oh, she would. The night of the dinner arrived. Claire had outdone herself, rented linens, catered food, floral arrangements, all paid for with my money, of course. The living room was filled with guests, friends, old neighbors, even Nathan's colleagues. Everyone came dressed in black, sipping wine, murmuring condolences. And there I stood, the grieving widower, frail, quiet, forgetful, just as they wanted me to be. Claire flitted around the room like the lady of the house. She greeted people at the door, adjusted the lighting, even handed out printed programs with Ellen's photo on the front. "Thank you for coming," she said, again and again. "Gerald needs your support during this difficult time." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. They thought they had won. They had no idea they were standing in the middle of their own execution. After dinner, I stood up to give a speech. Claire helped me to my feet, gently, like I was brittle. I cleared my throat. The room quieted. "Thank you all for coming," I began, voice soft, slow. "Ellen meant the world to me. And tonight, I want to honor her, not just with memories, but with truth." Claire smiled at the guests, nodding. She thought she was about to hear some sentimental sob story. Instead, I clicked the small remote in my pocket. The flat-screen TV behind me flickered to life. The room froze. On screen was footage, grainy, but clear. Claire, in my living room, saying, "He's not going to last the year, I swear. Once he's gone, we'll flip the house. That's a gold mine sitting on 3 acres. Gasps. Eyes widened. Someone dropped a wine glass. I let it play. Clip after clip. Claire's greedy remarks. Nathan's smirks. Their whispered talks about power of attorney. Their plans for the inheritance. When I turned back to the room, Claire had gone pale. Nathan looked like he'd seen a ghost. I smiled. "Ellen always told me to trust my gut," I said, my voice gaining strength. And I did. I saw the signs. I followed the lies. And now, I've made sure they'll never touch a single cent of her legacy. I pulled a thick envelope from my coat pocket and held it up. "This is a copy of my new will. Everything, the house, the accounts, the land, has been placed in a trust. And none of it goes to Nathan or Claire. Claire stepped forward, trembling. Gerald, please, you're confused. We were just trying to help. I turned to the crowd. They weren't helping. They were circling like vultures. I walked to the front door, opened it. A local sheriff's deputy stepped in. Margaret had made a few calls of her own. Claire Sanders, the deputy said, you're under investigation for financial coercion and fraud against a senior citizen. The silence was deafening. Nathan started to protest, but the deputy held up a hand. Sir, you may want to speak to an attorney. We have enough evidence to question you both. Claire screamed. Nathan backed away like a scared child. I watched them go, handcuffed and speechless. Ellen would have loved that part. The next few days felt like a dream. Claire and Nathan were removed from the house, their faces twisted in shock and anger. The local authorities were investigating the fraud scheme, the forged documents, the secret meetings. The truth had come crashing down on them like a thunderstorm, and there was no escape. I never had to do anything drastic. The proof was there. Their words were their undoing. They couldn't wriggle out of the trap they'd set themselves. The house was quiet now. A silence I welcomed, a silence that meant peace. I stood in front of Ellen's favorite spot, the garden outside, where she used to sit and read for hours, sipping her tea, watching the birds. The roses she planted were blooming, vibrant and beautiful. And in the middle of it all, a single bench, engraved with her name, Ellen Sanders, a life of love, a legacy of kindness. I sat on that bench, feeling the weight of everything. The loss of Ellen, the betrayal, the revenge. It all seemed so heavy, like a burden I hadn't realized I'd been carrying all these years. I closed my eyes. Claire and Nathan had their day in court. The fraud charges were more than they could handle. By the time the dust settled, they were stripped of everything, the house, the wealth they thought they'd gained. But I wasn't just doing this for the money. It was about justice. It was about giving Ellen a proper farewell, one where she wasn't a victim of their greed, one where her legacy lived on in peace. A few weeks passed. The house still felt strange, but in the best way. I was learning to live without Ellen, though it would take time. It always would. I took a step back, reflecting on everything. In the end, I had the satisfaction of knowing that my life wasn't about the inheritance. It wasn't about the money. It was about integrity, about showing the world that the truth will always rise to the surface, no matter how deep the lies are buried. The final chapter had been written. The day of the memorial was long gone, but the feeling of justice still lingered. I didn't need to revenge anymore. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I was free. I stood up from the bench, letting the wind rush past me, and just for a moment, I felt her presence. I felt Ellen beside me, like she always used to be, strong, loving, encouraging me to stand tall. With the house and land secured in the trust for the future, I could finally let go. The night grew darker, but the stars were brighter than ever. This time, I wasn't alone.